I just want to introduce a couple of people here to my left who will be helping me out with the presentation tonight. Natasha Jones from Keller Jones Lawyers. Natasha will be sharing all things about the election process and nomination process. And by the way, nominations open today, so that's cool. And Andrea Malone, who is our Director of Legislation here, and she'll go through a little bit of the legislative basis for local government and how local government works. Thank you, Justin, for welcoming and acknowledging the land, but I'll do that again. We acknowledge that this meeting is held on Bungala land, and we give thanks for the use of this land in terms of this meeting. Bit of an overview of the session. We'll give a little bit of an introduction as to the city of Whyalla itself, what the council looks like. Then we'll go, why should you actually nominate? Go through a few slides about that and hopefully whet your appetites to thinking, oh, I might just log on to the EXA website tomorrow and nominate for council. Part 2 will be the nomination process. Part 3, the election process. So parts 2 and 3 we'll hear from Natasha. Part 4 is after the election. So the vote has been held and you're elected. We'll say congratulations, that's fabulous news. Now what? We'll give a little bit of a briefing in terms of what happens after the election and for the first couple of months of a new council. And then we'll close and do some more networking. So hopefully it will be at 7 o'clock and not much later or no later than that. There is a lot of material to go through though, so just give you that information to start off with. This is a slide which is a little bit about Whyalla. Whyalla is actually the biggest city in the Eyre Peninsula region. It is one of the biggest cities outside of Adelaide, with only Murray Bridge and Mount Gambier rivaling in size. So we're a pretty important city to the state in terms of the gross regional product and in terms of what this city actually contributes to the region. Some of the information on there. We've got 11,000 rateable properties. We've got a population of around 21,000. The council area is 1,000 square kilometres. The council itself has an operating income of $33.2 million and total operating expenditure of $35 million. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the scope of the business of the council. The council makes decisions on behalf of the community and for the community and makes a huge contribution to the community. But it's also a really large business and a complex operating environment that we work in. And to give it a little bit more of an indication as to the complexities of it, this is a slide which shows all of the different services that the council runs. It's all of the usual suspects in terms of parking and events and leisure facilities and parks and gardens and roads and footpaths and water, etc. But we also run a number of services here in Whyalla that not many other councils run. So we have a cemetery and a crematorium. Not all councils have a cemetery and a crematorium. We have an airport. Not all councils, in fact, very few councils have airports. We have, our amazing jetty and marina. Not all councils have coastlines or a jetty and a marina. One of the services that we provide that very, very few councils have is childcare services. And so there are some unique elements to what it is that we do as a council that not many other councils do. And when you're part of an elected body and also for staff working in a council, the diversity of those services is what makes it fascinatingly interesting. You can go from one day talking about the replacement of dog poo bags on the foreshore to the next minute talking about multi-billion-dollar investments into the city, such as the Foreshore Master Plan. So the complexity and diversity of services and things that you get involved in are huge. So the council itself, we have a mayor and we have 9 area councillors. Andrea will go into a little bit more about this with a couple of slides that she's presenting, but we have 9 area councillors, and in 2018, just a little bit of information, there were 4 candidates for the position of mayor, and there were 21 candidates for the position of those 9 area councillors. There are 15,728, to be precise, electors on the voters roll. It's not compulsory to vote in a local government election, but there is the potential that, you know, there are 15,000 odd votes out there in terms of being elected to council. Just for some context, across South Australia, the November 2022 elections, there's 66 councils participating in those elections. And in total, across South Australia, there's 989 positions open for election. So if you think about the Electoral Commissioner of South Australia, they're running more than 66 elections, really, because, you know, whilst we don't have wards, many councils have wards and it's separate elections in those councils. So the Electoral Commissioner of South Australia is going to be hugely busy over the next couple of months until the outcome of the elections are known. Okay, so why should you nominate for council? Got a little video here that we want to play. Michelle, if I can get you to put that on, please. Thanks.
Why nominate as a councillor? I think it's a great opportunity. We all learn skills and have ideas and concepts that we go through in our life to bring that skill set to the fore for your community's benefit. You can't always invest money in your own community to make it a better place, but you can invest your time, your ideas and your knowledge and skills and have a real impact in your community. That's a really good reason for nominating as a councillor.
There we go. Okay. So the gentleman that was just talking then, Brian, he's a councillor at another council, and talking about the contributions to the community that, you know, being a councillor that you can do. You know, there's been some amazing outcomes and achievements of the Whyalla councils over the past number of years, quite a number of years. You can see some of them up there. I mean, the jetty, you know, the jetty is an iconic jetty that is seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of visitors come, and thousands each year. It's known right across the world. The Bennett Oval Outfield enabled AFL and SANFL standard games to be played here in Whyalla. And, you know, not only those games being played, the visitors that come to the city to see those games is making a contribution, you know, to the economy of the city. The airport upgrade, you know, it's now an amazing airport whereby, you know, flights that are coming in, we're continuing work on upgrades to the runways, and, you know, hopefully in time, in a number of years down the track, we can continue that work on upgrading the runways and get bigger flights in here. The foreshore master plan, which has been adopted, and we're now looking to, you know, start resourcing and getting those things down and happening down at the foreshore. It's incredible, and all of these things are coming through the skills and through the thinking and the ideas, you know, of the community, of the administration, and of the elected body. It's all of that put together that actually starts these outcomes happening. So it's absolutely brilliant. The role of a council, some of the typical activities and so on, leadership, strategy, civic events, representing councils, attending briefings and meetings, listening and hearing the voice of the community, discussing and debating and deciding when you're in a council meeting in terms of things that you want to do or things that the council is going to endorse, attending professional development and building skills, preparing for meetings and assisting community members. You know, there's a fair bit of activity that happens, and lots of diversity in the activity as well, lots of things to keep you interested. Michelle. This is just about some of the qualities.
Well, I do very much believe that you have to be a team player.
Well, I think it's really good to be confident. It's good to be civic-minded, to care about your community and to want to give back to your community.
You need to be appreciative of your community and open to your community, absolutely. It's great to be able to speak and debate in the chamber. It's also very, very important to be able to listen and hear what people are saying and take that into account when making decisions.
So, some of the qualities of the councillors, the councillor, Felicity, Kay and Brian sort of talked about some of them. There are actually no formal qualifications that are required to be a council member. But it helps to have commitment and personal skills, being able to remain calm and respectful under pressure and considering all viewpoints to contribute to good decisions, making decisions based on facts and not emotions, communicating well with other council members and staff and connecting with the community. And I think that came through loud and clear from Kay and Brian in the context of being civic-minded and caring and giving back to the community and being appreciative and open to the community and to the community's views.
With my cultural background, that was the first for our council. Sometimes, people who are quieter or with disabilities or with the minority backgrounds are not heard or not considered in the general mainstream. So it's very important that, we get a diversity in our community and women's voice.
Yep, and so Ona was talking about diversity and Whyalla Council has had a really strong and good track record in terms of encouraging and having diverse elected members and a diverse membership on the council. Indigenous Australians, people living with a disability, people from various different backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, women and young people, but everybody, no matter who they are or what background they come from, is encouraged to nominate and work on council for a better community, definitely. I want to just move to the future here in a vibrant future, and for this slide I'd like to ask Justin if you would like to speak to this one.
Yes, thanks for that, Kathy. So everyone in the room will know that we're on the cusp of a really exciting time in the evolution of the city. The major projects that the state government are progressing with a focus on hydrogen and renewable energy will deliver the much anticipated and needed diversification of our economy and at a scale of state and national significance. What that presents for the council over the next 4 years is the opportunity to leverage the billions, and that's billions with a B, billions of dollars worth of investment that is foreshadowed for the Port Bonython Hydrogen Hub, the Hydrogen Jobs SA plan, and the Northern Water Desalination Plant that will provide water to the north of our state, as well as providing water to hydrogen facilities and also to our city. Those projects will deliver thousands of jobs and will require us to continue to build the city's livability. And as Kathy mentioned in the opening comments, we are a city of state and national significance already with our iron ore mining and the steel production. But if you think about the role and function that Whyalla will play for the state and for the nation in coming years, where we'll be a major provider of power generated from renewable green hydrogen. We'll be a major provider of water, and we'll be also a major provider of hydrogen to support both domestic applications and uses, such as green steel within the steelworks, but all of the manufacturing and heavy industry opportunities that that hydrogen will present. And if you think about the social and the environmental, as well as the economic benefits that that type of investment and that type of industry will create for our city, it is really once in a lifetime opportunity. So it is really exciting times. Council will have a very direct and active role in progressing those projects in partnership with the state government, and the council will also continue to work towards building a partnership arrangement with both the federal and state government, which will deliver both the urban renewal of our city, as well as significant upgrades to housing, community facilities, sport and rec facilities, foreshore precincts, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a really exciting time, and encourage everyone who's contemplating running for council to put your hand up and be part of the decision making that will fundamentally change the way that the city will evolve for years to come, and how our community is serviced over the coming generations. Thanks, Kathy.
Justin? Back to this side. Yeah, so absolutely a vibrant future, and you know, how amazingly good would it be to actually be part of it as an elected member? It would be absolutely wonderful to have you. I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has any questions at the minute, or anything that that you'd like to comment or say.
Is part of the hydrogen plan to be exporting hydrogen as well?
Yes.
So are we looking at an ammonia plant? Because there seems to be studies that say that if they convert the hydrogen to ammonia, it's easier and cheaper to process and to ship. So that could be another area that we could be looking at.
We already are.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Ammonia's
Yes.
Oh, sorry to hike, but with your building a desalination plant, there seems to be a lot of problems with food production and the supply of food. Taking on what tomato farm, whatever it's called, and
Yep.
would we be able to use some of that water to actually, because of the good weather we have here, to start producing food here as well?
Well, there's no reason why not. The amount of water and water production across the region and what is planned is going to be significantly more water than certainly what is available in the region at this moment in time. You know, I think that we will only be stopped by our imaginations. Really, in the context of the opportunities that are really before us, and what can happen here in this region. Anything else? Any thoughts on from you guys as to what qualities you know, make up an elected member? We've heard people you know, talk about those qualities, and we've put some qualities up on the screen. Any thoughts from anybody in the audience about the qualities needed to be a council member?
So,
Yeah.
What sort of breakdown of the councils having ideas for the future of Whyalla? How does that sort of compare to the community bringing those ideas forward to the council members to then put forward and discuss and debate?
There's absolutely opportunity for ideas generation, ideas coming from the community. The elected members or council members are basically representatives of the community, and members of the community can interact with those elected members in multiple different ways, either directly through the different communication tools. Council runs very many vast and wide engagement activities across the city, and elected members, council members are in attendance at those in order to be able to listen and hear what it is and the feedback that comes from the community. Certainly one of the tasks very early on in a term of the council is to do a comprehensive review of all of its strategic plans and its community plans. We're in the process from an administration point of view planning those activities at the moment so that the new council can get out there and listen to the community in terms of where those ideas are from. And of course, individual elected members themselves can bring their own ideas to the table too. So, yeah.
I just bounce off Peter. I've got a question for our CEO.
Sure.
I was just going to say, with Justin, how do you interact with your elected members? So do you offer one-on-one meetings? Is there emails, phone calls? Yes, so just want to ask that.
Justin, over to you.
Yep. No, thank you for that question. Yeah, all of the above. There's a number of different ways that councillors can and the staff generally can interact, but certainly with myself and the councillors, that can be anything from one-on-one discussions, group discussions. We do have informal elected member briefings, usually at least one a month, if not, and sometimes in the lead up to annual business plan and budgets, that could become 2 or 3 sort of workshop environments. I find the workshop environments are a very important way of being able to have by their very nature, an informal discussion with councillors and understand, what are their motivations, what are their concerns, what do they want to see or achieve, and that those discussions in that forum are not formal decision-making environments, but they do provide some rich information to help inform the reports that come back to council to make decisions in due course. So I'd encourage you to have a chat with the councillors. I try to make myself readily available, and always, obviously, with technology, phone, email, and in person. So hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Yes, Lee. I'd just say all those things we've talked about, all those points that he made are really, really important. But it's really important if you go into public life like this, to understand it's not that easy. Don't go in on one issue, go in on the big issue. Know your community. It's really important to know your community and know the issues and understand your community. But don't go in thinking, I'm going to sort that out, because you probably won't. It's very difficult. If it was that easy, governments, federal, state and local would do it. So I think that's really important to understand. You're not going to solve the problems by yourself by going in there. You have to be part of the big picture and part of the team. And the teamwork is really important. If you don't have a team, it doesn't work. And don't I know that?
Thank you for that. Teamwork was certainly one of the items that was mentioned, I think, by Felicity when she was talking there, and absolutely, teamwork is really critical. Agreed. Mayor?
Thank you, Kathy. Few things. I'll answer Fiona question. Justin's an excellent CEO and very open to the councillors in this particular. So, I guess the one thing I'd like to make mention of, and I think it's critically important, probably even going on from what Lynn said about working with the team. I think one of the exciting outcomes of this term of government, of local government, is the behaviour reforms that come into place at the start of this next election. And what this will mean is that there will be standards of behaviour that have to be adhered to by all council members, and I think that's incredibly important. And there will be outcomes that will come from poor behaviour, and there'll also be frameworks there to support good behaviour within the council. And I think it's critical. It's going to be a game changer for councils in South Australia. It makes poor behaviour accountable, and you won't just be say sorry anymore. There's going to be very strong rules and regulations that you'll have to abide by. So coming into the new council, You'll need to be aware of that. You'll need to learn those rules, and it's something that you need to take very seriously and learn. So that's going to be a big part of the role. Yes, doesn't account to me. I don't need to listen to that. That's incredibly important, and it's going to be a game changer for LGA in South Australia. And I was very proud to be part of the state board that was part of creating these reforms. It's also going to be fantastic making our training framework, which will mean that all councillors will be given training to know how they sit as a councillor, and also around all this new behaviour reform. So it's a very exciting time. It's going to be probably a bigger job going into this council than perhaps previous councils, but you need to be aware that that's going to occur, and you need to take that 100% seriously, because it's incredibly important part of then creating a council that does work as a team respectfully, and that's how you have a successful council. And I'm very proud to say that I've had that in the last 4 years.
Thanks, Claire. We've got a couple of slides a bit later in the presentation in terms of the behavioural framework and mandatory training, so we will come through to that, but thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Andrea, who is going to talk a bit about where council sits in the framework of government.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so good evening, everybody. As you would be very aware, there are 3 tiers of government in Australia. There's the Commonwealth government, the state government, and there's local government. It may not be quite as known that the Commonwealth government and the state government, the parliaments, operate under their own constitutions. So we've got the Constitution of Australia, we've got the Constitution of South Australia. Local government sits under the state. It is governed by an act of the state parliament, so it doesn't have its own constitution. And I just mention that because local government works very closely with other tiers of government. We get not only do we have a big project at the moment, the hydrogen project, but we get funding from the Commonwealth government for roads. They get grants. We work closely with the state for various reforms. There's been a big reform of the Local Government Act, which Claire has just referred to part of that. So local government does a lot of policy work and interaction with other tiers of government. But local government is just what it says, local. It is responsible for providing the services and facilities in the local area. And Whyalla has some very important areas like the recreation centre, the foreshore redevelopment, the dog and cat management. It has environmental responsibilities. It has to deal with asbestos. It has to deal with treeing and getting a better environment in the community as a whole. And it does waste management and all of those kinds of tasks that you'd be aware of. It also does the less big picture things, such as regulating certain types of activities, parking, everyone probably know about that, animals, animal welfare and animal regulation of dogs and cats, and public health. We've got a big public health plan in council, which is a mandatory plan, which governs a lot of things that council then does. So, thank you. There are 2 parts to the council in effect. There's the elected body, and that's where your interests lie. And the elected body is it's just that, it's elected by the community. And then there's the administration, and that is where Justin presides and staff. So you've got the elected body responsible for setting the strategic direction, setting budgetary direction, making council policies that are required under various pieces of legislation, employing the CEO, the council itself employs the CEO and undertakes CEO performance reviews. The administration, on the other hand, is responsible for implementing the plans, managing the budget, implementing the policies, and the CEO is responsible for employing and managing staff. So they're two different areas of responsibility, but of course we have to work very, very closely, all of us, as the corporation of the council, to achieve those outcomes. So it's a partnership. Now, one of the key important pieces of legislation that councils have been basically set up under is this. I've got a little show and tell. This is the Local Government Act. And it is responsible for setting the governance structure for how council operates, all councils operate. It also imposes duties and requirements on council members, and some of these have been given more prominence in some of the recent reforms. Claire mentioned the behavioural changes, the setting of standards for behaviour and the processes that sit under that. But also there's been a greater emphasis on acting with integrity, acting honestly at all times, declaring any conflicts of interest. There's been a change to the conflict of interest provision, so those sorts of new changes will be brought into council, but with briefings and support and assistance from the administration. And the requirement to approach decision making with an open mind. We heard earlier from a member of the audience talking about how important it is that you don't come with a single issue that you're determined to just achieve, because that actually is not how the legal decision-making framework works. You are actually obligated to come to council with an open mind and listen to the arguments. And it may be that for all you thought that particular issue was the thing that you wanted to do, when you hear other arguments, it may well be that, you know, you change your mind. That's part and parcel of good decision making. And the other sort of safeguard that is in the Act is the requirement for council members to disclose certain financial interests that they have. So there's a requirement after being elected to fill out a form. It requires you to say not what your income is, but where you get your income, what investments you might have, and other financial details. And that goes on the website, and the state parliament does it too. So that that feeds into an ability to be able to see whether there's a conflict of interest occurring, or whether you are acting to ensure that you disclose those conflicts and manage them in a different way. Everyone's going to have a conflict of interest at some stage. It's how living in especially a smaller regional community, you're very likely to be making decisions about things that you personally or your family or friends are involved in, and in which case you need to just disclose those conflicts and we manage them. So there's some of the key issues that sit within this little piece of legislation, but we also have councils deal with a lot of legislation. So we've got the Dog and Cat Management Act, we've got the Local Nuisance Litter Control Act, we've got the Planning Infrastructure Act. There are many, many pieces of legislation, no doubt become very familiar with if you get onto council, and that's probably all I want to say about that tonight. Thank you.
Andrea. Any questions on the legal framework or the information that was presented from Andrea? Over to Natasha now. Thank you, Natasha. Going to talk to us first about the nomination process, and then once you've nominated and so on, a bit about campaigning and the election process. So I'll thank you, Natasha.
Thanks, Gabby. Well, welcome. This is an exciting year for local government. Obviously, it only occurs once every 4 years. So these sessions conducted by the council are very important in, I suppose, trying to get new candidates and people who might be interested in running for council. It is no doubt a commitment. There is a time commitment, and there is whilst there is a lot of information, I know that at a candidate briefing I was at the other night, a CEO put down the agenda for a particular meeting. So some of them can be a lot to get through, but at the same time, it's exciting to be part of that decision-making body, and also not only being part of a governing body, but also being able to be a representative of the community. Now, I'm going to run through the mechanics of the election process and some of the nuances about eligibility and some of the requirements that if you chose to nominate, what that means, what you have to do. And then if you're a successful candidate and become a council member, then what's required of you. Now, of course, to be eligible to nominate, you have to be 18 or over. And as at the close of the roll, you need to be an Australian citizen. Now, the close of the electoral roll was the 29th of July. So I'm just pulling out some of the critical dates if anyone asks me. But you now needed to be an Australian citizen and an elector for the area. Now, that means a person. Now, a body corporate can qualify, or a group of persons who are enrolled on the voters' roll. Now, this whole issue around Australian citizenship, you can be a dual citizen. So I know that might have been last time round, there were, or certainly at a federal level, there were issues about dual citizenship, but that's okay at a local government level. You can, so it's either that you're Australian citizen and you're an elector in the area, or you're a nominee of a body corporate. So that means someone who is nominated to represent a body corporate, so a company, and or it can be a group. Now that group needs to be on the voters' roll, and also a nominee needs to be put forward as the person who is the responsible person for that group. So it must have your name on the voters' roll. So either you personally, or the body corporate, or the group. So who is not eligible? Very sensitive this one. That's me. Oh, that's you. Oh, I won't touch it. So who cannot stand? So state or federal MPs cannot stand. If you have been an undischarged bankrupt, now if you have been in the unfortunate position, if you're a discharged bankrupt, that's okay. So that means you don't have any remaining debts anymore. But if you are undischarged bankrupt, or a person receiving a benefit for relief of insolvent debts, then you do not, you are not eligible. If you have been sentenced to imprisonment, obviously that makes it a little bit difficult, but it also includes any liability to serve the balance of a sentence, but also a suspended sentence as well. If you are a council employee employed by the same council, you're not eligible. If you happen to have been disqualified by court order under the Local Government Act, which is rare, but has occurred, you're equally not eligible. And also if you're a candidate in another council area. So you need to decide if you happen to be a person on the, say, the House of Assembly roll as a person who resides in the city of Whyalla in your own right, you can nominate, but you also cannot nominate in a council area where you might own a different council area where you might own investment property, for instance. Okay, the nominations procedure. So it opened today and it closes at noon on the 6th of September. Do not leave it until noon on the 6th of September to nominate. There have been situations where there have been IT issues around that time, and there has been a situation where nominations have not been processed before that noon cut-off time. So if you are thinking about nominating, then give yourself plenty of time to actually get that nomination in. Nominations can occur electronically, and certainly EXA, so the Electoral Commission of South Australia, are encouraging nominations to be electronic. They are very much advocating their portal, which apparently is very intuitive and easy to use. I'll take their word on that, but a nomination can only be lodged during that period. You can do it in a hard copy. There are nomination forms, and the Electoral Commission does have a nomination kit. They have them in hard copy, and they also have them on their website. So you can access this electronically. It's incredibly useful. So if you're thinking about it, it has absolutely everything contained in here that I'm certainly covering. One of the tools in that kit is a candidate handbook, and it's really the go-to guide for anyone who does wish to nominate. There are different nomination forms, so whether you're doing it on hard copy or through the electronic portal, just make sure you're selecting the right form. If you are nominating individually and nominating in your own right, there's a form which is numbered 3. If you are the nominated person of a body corporate, then it's form 4. And then if you are the nominated person of a group, it's form 5. But certainly if you are doing it electronically, it will guide you through that in terms of where you need to click on the portal. I just wanted to touch on profiles. This is a example of a candidate profile. If you nominate, a candidate profile is needed. It's required. You don't need to provide a photo, but you certainly need to provide a statement about yourself. Now, a nomination cannot be accepted without this profile. You do need certain information contained on it. So you need to remember that once you nominate, there is certain information about you that will become public. And then again, if you are successful, you are elected to a position of public office. So there's lots of disclosures that will be required of you, both as a candidate and then further into the future if you are successful. Certain things that are needed on your candidate profile will be a street address or an email address or a phone number. Now, the Electoral Commissioner has committed to the fact that his office will accept a post office box as opposed to a street address. You also need to provide a statement attesting to the fact that you take responsibility for the content of it. So it needs to be accurate and about you. You need to make certain disclosures about whether you are a member of a political party, whether you've been a member of a political party in the prior 12 months, and the name of that political party. And obviously it needs to be signed and dated and no more than 1,000 words. Now, the portal will automatically cut off. So if you're in mid-sentence and you hit your 1,000 words, it will stop. So make sure you...
1,000 characters.
Oh, characters, sorry. Yeah, words, that's a lot, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, characters, be writing a book. But be very clear that it's accurate, it's not misleading, your language is neutral, and you can't actually refer to other candidates for election without their written consent. And these things have occurred in the past, so that's why these rules are in place now. And you also are unable to comment on decisions or actions that have been taken by council, or even decisions or actions that have been taken by past council or past council members. If you choose to nominate, the handbook provides some examples on the type of language that's acceptable, because you need to get your candidate statement right. If you don't, your nomination can be rejected. And so that's another important reason for getting your nomination in early, well before that noon deadline. But certainly in this candidate statement, the types of things that you would talk about is obviously why you wish to become an elected member, why you wish to contribute, how you wish to do that, your community interests, your work, what memberships you might hold, your position on policy positions. If you have a campaign website, then you would provide the details of the website in your candidate profile, and equally, if you have any social media platforms, you would also include that on your candidate profile. It's really important to include, actually, let's go back to that. The photographs are another area that people can get tripped up on, but there are some specific rules around the criteria, but generally what you need to provide for your passport is generally the accepted photograph on here, because it has to be a valid one. I think it's within the last 12 months. So going back 10 years isn't going to work for this, although we might want to do that, it's not going to be accepted. So they're the sorts of things, and you actually have to declare that you comply with all of these requirements too. So let's go to yes. So nominations close, as I've said already, at noon, 6th of September. And as soon as reasonably practicable, after 4 p.m. on that day, the Deputy Returning Officer is going to publicly announce the names of the candidates. Now, this is going to be the first occasion when the names of the candidates are publicly known, because while we are in the nomination process, for the first election cycle ever, I believe, we do not know the names of candidates. So it used to be the case that candidates would be pinned up on boards and pin boards in the council reception area. That's not the case any longer, and it's to avoid that position of, particularly when they used some councils had wards in place, where they would approach the board and think, oh, there's too many nominations there, I'm going to get my nomination over here. So it avoids that, but it just makes it the anonymity is a benefit, I think, and certainly the Electoral Commissioner has that view. What will also occur is the declaration of any candidates who are elected unopposed. Now, that would only occur if the number of candidates equaled the number of positions on council. Then those candidates would be elected unopposed. Or, for instance, if we only had one candidate for the role of mayor. So they're the situations that can occur. But otherwise, there'll also be a draw by lot for positions for names on the ballot paper, and that's going to be conducted in the council chamber. Also, in addition to that, on the Excel website, names of candidates will be displayed on the website within 24 hours, and then the candidate profiles thereafter within 14 days. So let's chat. Any questions? Yes, Lynn.
Not very often you get free legal advice, so.
Hang on, I'm starting the clock right now.
Well, you've definitely have to be an Australian citizen and on the electoral roll or voters list. In Whyalla, we had £10 pomps that came out in the 60s and 70s that helped build our city, were wonderful. A lot of them have never become Australian citizens, but are on the electoral roll. Are they eligible? And it wouldn't be just UK migrants, be other migrants from Europe, etc. as well. Are they eligible or not? Because it's on the roll for many, many years.
If they're on the House of Assembly roll,
Okay.
they're on.
The next one was council employees. You mentioned that. Now, in the federal and state governments, if you run for a position, parliamentary position, then you have to resign and go through the election process. You don't get paid for that time. But if you lose, then generally you are accepted back if you get your old position back. Can you tell me what the situation is with councils?
Yes, so for those, so are we talking for state government when it's an,
Yeah, I'm talking about council employees. Do they follow the same guidelines as all?
they don't.
If you're on council, but you decide you want to run, you have to resign.
No,
You don't get that.
it's not the same. The same rules don't apply.
That's a bit rough, needs to be changed. There's decisions about you can't reflect on previous councils or councillors or whatever. Is that something new?
It is, yes.
People have done their campaigns for years on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be
I think
interesting.
it's to avoid that
Yeah.
match that might happen.
Thank you. That's it. Got me through.
Perfect.
Anything else?
Have I passed?
I've got a question. So with that new rule that's been put in place, so how is Exeter going to actually manage that with the candidates when they're putting up social media? How are they going to be managed?
Great question, because already the electoral commissioner has already commented around the limited resources of his office. The monitoring of it is likely going to be the other candidates and members of the public that are out there viewing the candidate statements.
What about council staff?
The electoral commissioner is the body that is responsible for the oversight, and so if there were any complaints made, the complaints can be made by anyone. Would be
Let's go straight there.
correct.
That's the point I'm trying to
Yeah.
make.
Correct.
People might come to the council staff here and say, oh, you know, Joe Blow's put this up.
They need to be directed to the electoral commissioner. Yes. So there's a lot that's been taken out of the hands of council and also the local government association, and then it has now shifted over.
So just give an example to the potential candidates about what might be reflecting on a past achievement of council. So when they're doing their campaign,
It could be if, and I'm happy for anyone to step in if you've got examples, but a common one has been where a council member has spoken negatively about something that the council has decided upon previously, and how that has, I say, being negative is probably understated, describing it as negative.
If the council candidate says, "Oh, I'm going to, we're not going to do those council rates like that council did." What, we're going to do better, or what,
Yeah, absolutely. So, saying you're going to do something better, that the previous decisions of the council on a particular matter have been rubbish. That's the kind of statements that will be. I'm not sure that your nomination will be accepted if you make. Well, it won't be. Statements like that.
Oh, sorry, just to clarify, are you talking on their actual campaigning page, or even if they've done it on their own personal social media page?
So I know these rules apply to your candidate profile. I would still be equally mindful and very careful about statements that you might make like that in social media.
Yeah.
So I was going to say there are some other rules that apply that I'll come to.
What about past social media?
So this it relates to the election period, or when you publicly declare that you are going to be a candidate.
Justin, you're wanting to make a comment?
Yes, I was just going to add some extra comments around this employees not being able to or not being eligible for a councillor. That's at the time if they're successful. So they would need to, if they nominate to become a councillor, they would have to take leave without pay during the caretaker period. If they're successful through the election process, they would then need to resign at that time to be able to become a councillor. I think it's at the time of the election that they would need to terminate their employment as an employee.
So if that's a position taken, that would be on a council by council basis. But certainly, if that were the position of the City of Whyalla in relation to how employees were managed, it would need to be made known to those employees who wished to be nominated as candidate.
But do they get their job back or not? They don't, if they lose. If they lose, do they get their job back? If they get employed, they get the job.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we can go back to employees and.
They're an employee.
If it's from another council, yeah. So,
One more question, Kath.
yeah.
Sure. One more.
So devil's advocate here.
Yeah, sure.
So what if candidates choose to slander other candidates on social media?
I'll go down, go back.
What's the action that gets taken there?
If they choose to slander other candidates on
Yeah.
social media
During the campaign
during the
period?
campaign, then that matter should be raised with the electoral commissioner in terms of the behaviour that candidate is undertaking. And all complaints of that nature should go through the electoral.
Because we should provide some clarification around council employees. You might recall the criteria on eligibility to nominate. You cannot nominate for the council that you work for, but you can nominate for another council. So when we're talking about, what requirements might be in place, it's not, you're not able to nominate for your own council. It would only be if you're going for somewhere else.
So if you are wishing to nominate for your own council that you're an employee in, you would
have to resign.
You have to resign before you can actually nominate. So to provide that clarification.
Yeah, what I've been talking about has been if you are employed, say, by the City of Whyalla and wish to nominate for a different council. But I understand the discussion has come more to a council employee wishing to nominate for its own council election. In those circumstances, they would have to resign to then be eligible under the Elections Act. So, big step to take.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move on because I know I'm running against the clock.
Yep, next slide.
So just very quickly around campaigning, electoral material. Electoral material is anything that is intended to affect the result of an election. So anything that's calculated to affect the outcome is considered to be electoral material. Obviously, that's a wide range of communication and can certainly be printed, electronic. Social media is the big one, but also it includes hard copy information as well. One thing that you must include on any electoral material, whether it is electronic or in hard form, is an authorisation, and this is the information that needs to be included in your authorisation. On social media sites, in the About section is the place where you would publish the authorisation. You need to make sure you include all this detail. That candidate handbook gives you all of the information and language to use, but there is a penalty that applies if you don't get it right. So it is important. The next one, you also need to make sure that anything you do publish is accurate. So it cannot contain any misleading or inaccurate statements. So again, I think that comes back to what we were talking about before in candidate profiles, but this is much broader. It applies to everything that you might push out there as part of your election campaign. And again, there is a penalty that applies. And this is one area that the Electoral Commissioner does follow up and has followed up in previous election cycles in relation to the accuracy of publications. That together with the failure to include an authorisation. So they're the two main areas that the Electoral Commissioner will prosecute, and he does and has. This has been a change for this election cycle. It is now prohibited for candidates to put up electoral advertising material, electoral signs on public roads and road infrastructure. So that includes corflutes, so things that might go on stroby poles, and anything that is plastic. You can put up electoral material, advertising posters on private property with the permission of the owner of that property, but it needs to be in accordance with the council's bylaws and any development requirements. So if you are choosing to go down the path of nominating, then it's just having regard to that and checking with the council to make sure you get it right. So the mail out of voting packs is from the Friday, the 14th of October and to Thursday, the 20th of October. Close of voting is at 5 o'clock on Thursday, the 10th of November. On the following Saturday, that's when the count will commence. So over that Saturday and Sunday, counting will commence, and scrutineers will also be included as part of the process. So if we just go to the next one, if you do wish to nominate, you can also appoint a scrutineer, and it's the choice of you as the candidate as to whether you do that. But that is essentially to ensure that the count is conducted fairly and in accordance with the law. So if there are scrutineers as part of the process, then they also have some obligations too. There are also, as I think it was either Kathy or Andrea mentioned, around all the pieces of legislation that you'll become familiar with. There's also some illegal practices in the Local Government Elections Act that are set out, and you just need to have regard to them. Obviously, there's some really obvious things. Clearly, being violent, intimidating anyone, or bribing anyone, it's come out of the question. Anyone who attempts to vote when they're not entitled to, that's an offence. If you seek to influence any result, if you want to open an envelope containing a vote, then that's an offence too. So there are some prohibitions around conduct. Let's go to the count. So I said it does start on the Saturday. It will commence with the mayoral count first, and it will continue over the weekend. Hopefully by the conclusion of the weekend, there will be some outcomes that can then be declared as the final outcome by the Monday by the Electoral Commissioner. So that's when we would be looking at some results becoming known. A couple of requirements that I'll just come to. All candidates need to complete a campaign donation return. There are two different types of returns that need to be provided, but it's all about gifts that you might receive as part of your campaign. People that might donate to assist, there are some requirements. So gifts greater than $500 but less than $2,500, and they can be calculated collectively. So it could be someone that's giving you help and it's of value at $50 a time, but collectively it amounts to $500. You need to include that. If you don't receive any donation at all, you still need to complete a donation return, but it would be a nil return, and that's what you would provide. And there are also some time requirements in which these need to be provided, and they are in your handout that you have. So together with campaign donation returns, There's also a large gift return. So that relates to anything over $2,500. There's a separate return, and again, it applies to all candidates. So you just need to be mindful of this, and then that's when it will trigger the requirement to fill out a large gift return. This means that you could have multiple large gift returns because you need to submit them within 5 days of receiving the gift. If you are fortunate enough to receive them, then you might have more than one large gift return. Again, in the handouts that are available, there are some disclosure dates that are important. They're also set out in the candidate kit provided by EXA as well. Now, primary returns, so there's a bit of form filling. I've been talking about forms as a candidate. This is now if you are successful. So a primary return, so once elected, you need to complete this within 6 weeks of being elected. And this is a return that is forward looking. And this is when it all starts to become important to disclose certain personal interests. And it is a relatively extensive form. It goes through, property interests, lots of different areas, where you are. Salaries. Yes, salary, income sources. There's lots of different areas, and actually give training just on the completion of these forms because they are extensive. And so you'll find also you need to complete a primary return and then ongoing returns throughout the course of the next 4 years, and you'll be required to complete ordinary returns as well. But whilst all that form filling might seem overwhelming, it is straightforward, and you'll be there'll be prompts by the council to make sure that you adhere to the requirements. Any questions before I sit down? I'll be available afterwards too.
So the council has been done locally in the past. Is that the same for this election? So usually in the past, as staff have been hired to carry out the count. So it's not happening like that now.
You'll have a returning officer, but certainly other staff are able to assist, and it might be Andrea or Kathy that may be able to give more accuracy on that.
Thanks. The council has a liaison officer, that's Michelle, and she liaises with the Electoral Commission to do sort of the administrative side of the election. But this election, Whyalla will not have internal returning officers. There is a returning officer appointed by the Electoral Commission who will come to Whyalla, lives in Whyalla in fact, in this particular case. He will carry out the counting, and that will be done in chambers. People can attend, but council staff will not be involved. There'll be no council staff involved at all.
Let's stick to that deadline.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha. And we are going a bit over time. My apologies for that. Not too many more slides. So you're elected. Congratulations. If you've been successful in the election, now what happens? So Whyalla Council meets at the moment on a monthly basis on a Monday. Councils have to meet at least once a month. So the formal meetings is on the third Monday of the month, and but quite often there will be elected member briefings as well. So often, we're sort of holding briefings probably most Monday nights, I would say, if I'm totally honest. But at a minimum, it must be once a month, and at the moment it's on a Monday. Meetings are subject to very formal procedures, and those meetings, are run very formally to get through the business of the agenda. As I said, briefing and information sessions may be held 2 to 3 times a month, depending on issues arising. We send agenda papers out in advance, so at the moment they always go out on a Thursday, the week before the Monday meeting, so that there's plenty of time to read the agenda. And there are also a number of council committees that council has that meets at different times. So, for example, we have an audit committee, that's a statutory committee, and that meets on a quarterly basis, and there are elected member representatives on that committee as well. You're elected. This is a bit of a program. You won't be able to read necessarily what's on there, but the first week of you being elected. So the count happens on the 12th and the 13th of November. It will take a number of days after the count occurs for the declaration to be actually made by the returning officer. But once the elections, both elections, the one for the mayor and also the one for the area councils, are declared, there will be a swearing-in ceremony of the new council. And at the moment, we are scheduling that for Monday, the 21st of November. The swearing-in ceremony, but that will be dependent on the electoral commissioner and the returning officer to make those declarations in time for that to occur. So the 21st of November will be a swearing-in ceremony and function, plus also a council member briefing. We want to, do a bit of a meet and greet with the leadership group, and also to help start the induction process and the building of knowledge across the new council. That same week on Wednesday, the 23rd of November, we're proposing a training and education session with the new council with the issue of new equipment, and we'll run a mock council meeting for new elected members and various other technology and meeting procedures information. On the Thursday of that week, the agenda for the first council meeting of the new council, which will be held on Monday, the 28th of November, the agenda for that meeting will go out. And then, as you see, there'll be the first meeting of the new council on the 28th of November. That agenda will contain some statutory items that the council needs to address at its first meeting. So there's a number of items like the appointing of a deputy mayor, the allowances and benefits policy, and various other items. Then in the first 6 months, we are well underway at the moment in preparing an induction program for the new council. That induction program will include a tour of the city, a number of different briefings on items such as delegations and confidential items, and various strategic issues that are currently before the council. But you will be very well supported, and the resources that will go in to support the council are thorough, and we won't leave you dangling out in mid-air, so to speak. Allowances and benefits, just a little bit of information on that. The current allowance for a council member is $19,110 per annum. It's an allowance, and that allowance is set by the Remuneration Tribunal. And that tribunal made this determination a couple of months ago. And so this is the starting allowance for the new councillors from this election. That is indexed on an annual basis by CPI. The mayor's allowance, again, set by the Remuneration Tribunal for the City of Whyalla is $76,440. And in essence, the mayor's allowance is set at 4 times the amount of a council member's allowance. A deputy mayor's allowance is $23,887 per annum, and that is set by the Remuneration Tribunal as well at 1.25 times the amount of a council member's allowance. Some expenses of a council member are reimbursed, for example, travel, childcare, those sorts of expenses that are incurred whilst a council member undertakes their duties. And of course, we provide access to the tools that you need in order to actually do the role. Training and development, there is mandatory training, and that mandatory training will be scheduled certainly in the first 12 months of the new council, regardless of whether you're a returning council member or a new council member. The training is mandatory. You all will need to do the training, and it's around behaviour, civic, legal and strategy and finance. Of course, there will also be access to other professional development for council members throughout the whole of the term of the council. And we've already mentioned this, and the Mayor mentioned it earlier, and Andrea has mentioned it as well, in terms of the changes to the Local Government Act and reform across local government. There is a real emphasis now in terms of the behavioural framework around working collaboratively. So Lynn mentioned before about, you know, working as a team and working together, and Felicity also mentioned that. Working collaboratively is really key to set a council up for success in terms of making good decisions. And it sets the community up for success. If the council is functioning constructively and collaboratively, then it's got to be better outcomes for the community, without a shadow of a doubt. So working collaboratively, acting with integrity, positive and constructive working relationships between elected members, between the council and the administration, and out into the community, recognising and supporting the role of the mayor, the principal member, but the mayor in this case, developing of your skills as a council member. The mayor is required to provide leadership across the council, and there is it's now been written into the legislation that is a role and a function of the mayor. It wasn't previously in the legislation, and there is now the imprimatur that the mayor is doing that. And councillors to work collaboratively in the interests of the community. It's not about self-interest, it's about in the interests of the community. And these are provisions, new provisions that have come in, you know, because there have been in the past in many councils across the state some failings. You know, not this term of council, but the previous, you know, a number of years ago at Burnside Council, quite a lot of failings there in terms of the behaviour. Many stories in the newspapers around Tea Tree Gully at the moment, and so, you know, there are lots of examples of behaviours that are not really setting the community up for success in terms of decision making in local government. This framework, this new framework, which has now come in, will actually provide a much better environment for councils to be working in, which is fabulous. Really good. Any questions in terms of those last slides? No? Okay. Justin, would you like to make any final comments, thoughts?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, my last comment, just off the back of what you just said, the opportunities before the local community to elect a strong, positive and united group of councillors to steer the ship and to, you know, guide the council and the community into what is a really exciting future. There is a, as has been mentioned, there are some potential downsides of holding public office. You do become a civic leader if you're not already a civic leader. A lot of your what you say and do will be scrutinised, either directly or indirectly. So we are mindful of that. But as Kathy just mentioned, the changes to local government legislation is about creating an environment where council laws and mayors can work constructively together with the administration to deliver great outcomes for our community. So that's what it's all about, and really looking forward to the 6th of September and seeing who's put their hand up, and then more importantly mid-November to see who is successful in their candidacy. Regardless of who ends up in the mayor or councillor's role, our role as administration is to serve and support the council, and ultimately to provide great public value and services to our community, and that's what our focus will be on, regardless of the election process. So for those who nominate, we wish you well and look forward to seeing what happens between now and middle of November. Thanks, Kathy.
Fabulous. Thanks, Justin. And I echo Justin's comments in terms of, for those of you that do nominate, good luck. Wish you well. And you know, as a collective, the administration, you know, is looking forward to very productive relationships moving forward. Can you put the last slide up, please, Michelle? Just in closing out, I'd very much like to thank Enterprising Women and also the Whyalla Business and Tourism for hosting tonight. Thank you very much. I think it's been terrific. Thank you all for coming out and being interested in the election process, and particularly for those of you who are thinking about nominating as a candidate. Again, thank you and good evening.